Hello, everyone. My name is Becky Howell. I am the author of My Happiness book. Ta-da! I also have My Happiness workbook. I also have programs. I am the holistic success coach as well as happiness expert. So today I put together this series of webinars for helping people with their happiness. Today's is called Why Your Definition of Happiness Isn't Working for You. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about why happiness is so important. And it's interesting because, society's perception of happiness ebbs and flows. So sometimes it's what everyone is really wanting, what everyone wants to bring into their lives. And at other times it's considered superfluous, not important, frivolous, and other things are more important. So thankfully, right now, people are considering that happiness is important. And especially when there's so many things going on in the world that really is hard to maintain a happy practice and an internal happiness practice when there's so much other stuff going on. So this topic is really important right now when there is so much chaos and confusion and drama and scary actions. So having an internal happiness practice is really important. So this is an important beginning step in growing our happiness practice because our words and our thoughts create the world that we inhabit and then how we interact with that. So just as a FYI, I tend to use a lot of restaurant analogies because they illustrate that simple exchange. You open up with your request. What do you want? What are your desires? What are your needs? And then it is brought to you to satisfy those needs and requirements and wants and desires. And it's just a simple exchange. And then you pay for it with whatever currency is applicable for that moment. It's just so simple. And so when we look at this as an analogy for our emotional needs, our spiritual needs, what do we need to be happy? So what is your request? What do you need? And then it is given. Sometimes you have to give it to yourself. Sometimes the universe provides. Sometimes God provides. Whatever your framework that you're using. But you have to form the request to get what you need. Even if it's purely mental, even if it's, I need this, how can I get that? And then give it to yourself. So I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as we're going through this, because it's important to shift our understanding of emotional needs and our happiness into a realm of more tangible so we can get our hands on it. Because if you leave emotions where it's chaos and just theory and it's not really real, it's really hard to make progress. So if we can actually take what is intangible and take what is purely energetic exchanges and make them physical, it makes sense so much quicker. So why your definition of happiness isn't working for you is about how our dialogue of needs, wants, desires equals our requests. And if it's not working, then the whole system is broken. So we're going to go through a few examples in here that came up again and again in those happiness interviews that I conducted. So at about a week ago, I was at 100 happiness interviews. And so I've been asking people all over the world in all different circumstances and backgrounds and ethnicities and geographic locations, ages, what makes them happy, what is a big proponent of their happiness practice, and then what is actually stopping them from being happy. And so I've been keeping track of all the answers, and what's interesting is there's a few things that come up again and again. And it's just fascinating to me, the diversity of answers that you get. And yet at the same time, there is, in several key points, a convergence, so that no matter where you are, there are some things that seem to be similar. And so once you start looking at the similarities, you're realizing that it's not just a definition of happiness. It's not just a happiness practice. If you look at these, our thoughts, our reoccurring behavior patterns become archetypes. So they can be good archetypes or positive archetypes. They could be negative archetypes or learning archetypes. So it's just kind of fascinating that once we have a definition, once we have an idea of behavior, it actually starts to become self-perpetuating. You can spiral up or you can spiral down. So when we're talking about these definitions that are pretty common and keep coming up, you can also think of them as archetypes. So what archetypes are you? What are your definitions of happiness? What is your archetype of happiness? So go ahead and pop any questions in. You can go ahead and send them to me as an email as you watch this. You can send this to me as a Facebook Messenger. I'm actually really accessible, so if you have questions, ask, because that's how you're going to get feedback and learn. So the first definition that I want to talk about is actually kind of a cheat, because it's the lack of definition. So one of the most common responses I was getting when I was asking, what's your definition of happiness? What makes you happy? Is people would say they don't know. And it was always hesitant, and it didn't have much energy, much passion behind it. People don't know. So if you don't know what your definition of happiness is, then how can you request your needs be met for your happiness? Again, with the restaurant analogies, this is exactly like going into a restaurant, sitting down, the waiter comes up to you and says, what would you like to order? And you say you don't know. Okay, so what does a waiter typically do? They leave and they come back. What would you like to order? I don't know. They leave, they come back. Eventually, you both are going to get so frustrated that you're either just going to order something that you don't really want anyway, or you're going to leave and you're not going to get your needs met. And this is so similar to how people interact and engage with their happiness needs. Drives me crazy. So if you look at this as an archetype, then I would call this a bewildered requester. A bewildered requester. You don't really know what you want. You don't really know how to give it to yourself. You don't really know how to request what you need. And yet you're confused, lonely, angry, stuck about how to get your needs met, even though you don't know what your needs are. So one of the tips and techniques that I want to share about this is you have to know who you are. You have to know what you want. There's a few different ways to do this. One of the easiest ones is just to do a journal entry. What makes you happy? What activities make you happy? What emotions fall into your definition of happiness? There are 31 different emotion words that come up for people when they talk about happiness. I mentioned it in my book. You need to know what makes you happy, and then you need to be able to clearly request, to consciously create that practice for you. If I asked you point blank, what is your definition of happy? What do you need to be happy? And you go, you don't know. Then that is what you need to work on first. because you need to have an idea of how to request it. You need to have an idea of how to bring that into your life.